All right, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to Documenting Ourselves, Impacts, Outcomes, and Insights from the Community Collections Grant Program. This is the second of two symposia this year celebrating the American Folklife Center's Community Collection Grant awardees from across all 3 years of the program. Let me just take a time out and do a little housekeeping. For those of you who aren't familiar with the building, just right outside the door to the right are restrooms. We have drinks there. Please turn off your cell phone so you're not saved in our archives because we are recording this. Okay, I should say that I'm Nicki Saylor. I'm director of the American Folklife Center, and it's my honor to welcome our distinguished grant recipients, their families and friends, as well as the Center's Board of Trustees, whom I know are excited to learn more about the work of the awardees, their projects, and their resulting online collections. And thank you all for taking time to join in on what will undoubtedly be an engaging and thought-provoking set of presentations and discussions over the next 3 days. All right, so before there's going to be a URL, yes, okay. We want to direct you to the online symposium program, and that's at this URL. You can find out more information about the projects and the schedule for today, tomorrow, and Friday. We're going to divide into 6 sections of awardee presentations that are moderated by mostly trustees of the board, and each session will end up with ample time for audience question and discussion. Please note that these presentations will be recorded and you'll be able to see them on the library's website or the YouTube channel in the near future. And those will join the recordings that are already up from the April program. Okay, so it is also our hope that you will join us tonight at 7 p.m. in the Coolidge Auditorium of the library's Jefferson Building, the really pretty one across the street, for a concert of the Nick Gaitan Band and for an evening of Tejas roots music from Houston. This free performance celebrates the vibrant musical traditions of Tejano and Chicano culture, tracing their deep roots and regional influences along the Gulf Coast. So Nick is part of a team that led the 2022 Community Collection Project, Sonoros de Houston, documenting the city's Chicano music scene, which we will be hearing more about later today, and which was recently made available online on our website. So congratulations on the team for that. All right, so what is the Community Collection Grant Program? The program began in 2022 as part of the Library of Congress's Of the People Widening the Path initiative, thanks to a generous grant of $15 million from the Mellon Foundation. Since 2022, Of the People Widening the Path has served as a, quote, multi-year initiative that creates new opportunities for more Americans to engage with the Library of Congress and to add their perspectives to the library's collection, allowing the National Library to share a more inclusive American story. As part of this initiative, our grants have supported 10 individual and organizational recipients each year with grants of up to $50,000 to document contemporary cultural activities, traditions, and expressions in a wide range of geographical contexts, from Caribbean and Pacific Island to urban, suburban, rural areas of the South, Midwest, East, and West coasts of the mainland. So in total, 29 projects have been supported by programs from 2022 through today. As part of the program, awardees have also had the opportunity to be supported with an additional $10,000 to facilitate culminating public events in their communities for sharing the project documentation that they've been working on in these spaces that are most meaningful to their efforts, such as through film screenings, discussion events, and exhibitions. I know we'll be seeing and hearing about a number of these community events in these awardee presentations. Of equal priority is the archival preservation of awardee project documentation. The American Folklife Center staff work with teams to preserve and make accessible the interviews, videos, photographs, among other materials that they create as archival collections in our archives and online through the website. On that note, I want to draw your attention to a presentation that will be made by AFC staff tomorrow during session 4. As a number of community collection grant projects have now become fully available online, staff will discuss or demystify, you might say, the behind-the-scenes work that goes into producing these collections online, getting them prepared and preserved. All right, so it's important to stress the symposium's Documenting Ourselves theme. The grant program has served to bolster community-centered and community-led documentation and archival preservation efforts by removing financial and logistical barriers to doing cultural research and documentation. And the projects will be learning about, shed light on the importance of self-representation in cultural documentation and preservation work. In many ways, the Community Collection Grant Program advances longstanding priorities of the American Folklife Center in supporting people's cultural expression, building on a long line of efforts, including similar grant programs of past decades and years. Since its establishment in 1976, the center has prioritized the continued enrichment of presentations of and by the diverse culture keepers, their communities, and social groups in the center's archives, which constitutes part of our nation's historic and cultural record, as well as enriching community presentations and inclusion in all the center's in-person and online programming. All right, so this week's event is part of a year-long celebration of the Community Collection Grant awardees and their fabulous projects. And we've had associated concerts, dance events, blog posts, podcasts, and so on. The Documenting Ourselves Symposia are the two centerpiece events of this year's year-long celebration, and it's a chance to be together in person here at the library, which we cherish. All right, so without further ado, I now want to welcome a trustee member, Martha Gonzalez, who will be moderating our first session, taking us to Baltimore and Miami. Thank you and welcome again.
It's a real honor to be here and to be a part of this wonderful presentation. I can't wait. I think we're all going to learn a whole lot today. Our first speaker, I'm going to read both bios, and then we will move forward with the presentations. So Dr. Ashley Minner Jones is a community-based visual artist, curator, and folklorist from Baltimore, Maryland, where she has lived on the same block her entire life. Her interdisciplinary practice is deeply rooted in place, usually within the context of the U.S. South, and is focused on honoring and celebrating everyday people by lifting up their stories. She earned an MFA in Community Arts from Maryland Institute College of Art and a PhD in American Studies from University of Maryland College Park. As an artist, she has exhibited widely, and her work is represented in several prominent collections. Ashley is an enrolled member of the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina. Today, she will be presenting on her 2024 Community Collections Grant Project, Beyond Baltimore Street, Living Lumbee Legacies. Our second presenter is Dr. Aarti Mehta-Kroll, the Assistant Director of the Public Humanities Lab at FIU, is an urban sociologist by training. Her research focuses on how communities resist gentrification and the relationship between territorial stigma and place disruption. Prior to pursuing her doctorate, she worked in higher education as a community college transfer coordinator, undergraduate academic advisor, and program coordinator. Let's welcome them both now.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? Good. I'd like to begin first by thanking my dear friend, Dr. Michelle Stefano, who's a Folklife Specialist in Research and Programs at the American Folklife Center, and who has constantly mentored and supported and paved the way for me going on now 15 years. I followed her path directly from the Maryland State Arts Council as a folklorist into the Maryland Traditions Program in the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and then she came here and I went to the Smithsonian. So This is Beyond Baltimore Street, Living Lumbee Legacies. So Baltimore is the place today known as Baltimore is part of the ancestral homelands of the Piscataway and the Susquehannock peoples. But it may surprise you to know that the largest group of American Indian peoples inhabiting this area today are not indigenous to Maryland at all, but rather are descended from a diverse group of ancestors who came from as far north as the James River in Virginia and as far south as the Great Peedee in South Carolina. And fleeing disease and colonial warfare and enslavement, they coalesced in a place that is today known as Robeson County, North Carolina, and formed a cohesive community prior to the establishment of the United States. And since 1956, we've been partially federally recognized as the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina. We take our name from the Lumbee River, which winds its way through our tribal territory. You can see here it's pretty dark and murky and swampy, also known as Drowning Creek. My mom was baptized in this river like so many other Lumbees. I can hardly believe it. And what doesn't look like the river in the swamp still looks a lot like this. It's a very rural, agrarian place. And this is a field of tobacco. I snapped this picture in my own lifetime. You won't see as many fields of tobacco today. It's more soybeans and other crops. But in my mom's youth, tobacco was still the main cash crop of the area. And this is a family photo. That's my mom and my two uncles and my grandma standing by the field in the summertime. My mom was born in 1948, for reference. And she doesn't love it when I show this picture because she says it looks like they were so poor they didn't have any clothes, but they did have clothes. They did. It was just summer. But they were also poor. And many Lumbee families around the turn of the century lost their land, their homeland, holdings of their homeland through the Southern agricultural system and found themselves tenant farming or sharecropping to survive, which is a very rough way to go about it. And also uniquely in this part of the world, there was triracial segregation during the Jim Crow era, meaning there were 3 separate school systems, one for black kids, one for white kids, one for Indian kids, 3 sections in the movie theater. Imagine how they would have tried to segregate, say, a Trailways bus. And so for these reasons, many Lumbee veterans following World War II passed through major cities like Baltimore and Philadelphia and Detroit. And this is my grandfather, by the way. He was one of those veterans. And decided it would be way easier and better to make a living working in a factory in a city than having their whole family sharecrop somebody else's tobacco. And so they moved en masse northward, and Baltimore became the most popular destination. Now, the Lumbee World War II veterans weren't the first Lumbees to have this idea. The earliest Lumbee migrant to Baltimore that I'm aware of to date was Dr. Governor Worth Locklear, who is a distant relative, and he was an 1893 graduate of Baltimore University Schools of Medicine. So he was a doctor, he wasn't a governor, that's just his name. And it turns out that school was just a couple blocks away from the neighborhood where literally thousands of Lumbees would descend and settle a few decades later. And that neighborhood bridges the neighborhoods of Upper Fells Point and Washington Hill on the east side of town. And here are some Lumbee ladies standing at the heart of what would become affectionately known as their reservation. By the 1960s, there were businesses, churches, community centers, a huge population of Lumbee Indians in East Baltimore living right here. Now, as a result of complex factors like civil unrest, urban renewal, gentrification, just the way neighborhoods exist in the world, they're always changing, upward mobility, this neighborhood that was full of Indian businesses and churches and community centers was kind of languishing by the time I was born in 1983, and here's a photo of the stoop of the Baltimore American Indian Center from 1985 as it appeared in the News American. So some folks still lived in the neighborhood, but by then most had moved away, and very few of the businesses and places that belong to us existed in that time from the 1960s. And then here's a more recent image of the Baltimore American Indian Center featuring a mural directed by Muncie, Delaware artist Mr. Dan Nichols. And so this is where I spent a lot of time growing up with other Lumbee people who are younger than me. These kids are all in their 20s now. I was in my 20s then. And we realized that though we grew up with this Indian center in the neighborhood and an Indian church that still exists in the next block and a daycare for a while across the street and stories of other places, there was so much more that's just not there to see anymore. And so we convened our elders. These are the Native American seniors of the Baltimore American Indian Center. And we asked them to collaborate with us, and through a methodology, a unique methodology that involves such varied activities as eating, mapping, drawing, walking, and traditional archival research, we were able to map the reservation that they kind of established in their youth. Here's one of the elders pointing out a place where American Indians have inscribed themselves into the neighborhood. This is a brick one Broadway pier. Conversely, here's my Aunt Jeanette pointing to where she lived when she first moved to Baltimore, and it's a park. Used to be townhouses. So what came from that was a print illustrated guide to East Baltimore's historic American Indian reservation, which features a map with illustrations of some of the places that no longer exist, as well as archival and contemporary photos, and these are available in the back if anybody wants one on the side tables. Also, there's baltimorereservation.com. You can tour the neighborhood with, even more sites detailed as if you were there. You don't even have to leave your home or your place with internet access. And then toward the 2023 mark, all these resources came out in 2021, we realized really the projects were about the buildings, and the reservation was as much the people as anything. And here they are hanging out on Slim's bench. That's Slim in his overhauls. And this is where the elders like to hang out at the corner of East Baltimore Street and Madeira. And now only 3 of these folks are still with us and only 2 still living in Baltimore. And so it's time to celebrate and document them. And we were so thrilled to receive a community collections grant to do that important work. And I proposed, Beyond Baltimore Street will be an oral history and photo documentary project that celebrates the vibrant, fascinating, everyday lives of Baltimore Lumbee elders who managed to remain in community with one another despite the loss of their reservation, the geographic center they established for themselves as young people in the mid-20th century. One of the reasons their lives are so noteworthy is that they are transplants from one very specific place, the Lumbee tribal homeland, and they have enmeshed themselves in another very specific place, East Baltimore, and they act accordingly. Their perception of the world is uniquely colored by their experiences of farming under segregation in tribal territory as youths, and their contributions to Baltimore industry as adults. They speak Lumbee English with East Baltimore turns of phrase. They drink half and half, which in Baltimore is half iced tea and half lemonade, with their Carolina fried chicken. They have adopted their gardening to backyards and small community plots from acreages of fields at home, which is Lumbee shorthand for our tribal homeland in North Carolina. Their clothing, their home interiors, their leisure activities, everything about them reflects that they are of these 2 places, and so they are the progenitors of a whole new culture that has been inherited and ripped upon by the generations of Baltimore Lumbee that descend from them, like me. So this project has been a collaboration between myself and Jill Fannin-Previs, artist photographer, and 15 Lumbee elders. Well, actually 16 Lumbee elders. We picked up one along the way. I'll explain. And I proposed that I would record new interviews with everyone, all the elders who participated, and that Jill and I would go around and document them photographically, doing whatever they like to do for fun. So here we are walking East Point Mall in Dundalk, which is very fun. And they look like superheroes, and that's the idea. On the far right, you see Mr. Heyman Jones, who was 87 at the time. Now he's 88. Next to him is his wife, Jeanette Jones, my Aunt Jeanette, whom I referred to, who is now 83. In the middle, front and center, is Miss Minnie Sampson Maynor, who's 85, and Mr. James Earl Locklear on the left, who is 82. So they walk them all together most weekdays around this time. And that's one thing they do for fun. Here's Mr. James Earl looking very important on his cell phone. And then later we caught up with him at church. One of the interesting things about going around with them is you catch different elders participating in the activities of the person you're there to document. Here we were photographing Sister Linda Cox for choir practice, but James Earl was in the pew. Here he is in his house holding a Chavis Brothers LP. We had a famous rock and roll group that was Lumbee, the Chavis Brothers. And here he is holding a photo of himself as a young man in the Boulevard Diner in Dundalk, which is southeast Baltimore County, just across the city line. We went to bingo with Miss Maddie Fields, and that was amazing. And then, of course, you can't go to bingo by yourself, so this is where we picked up Miss Margaret Locklear Michael John, who is Maddie's niece, and her nickname is Nudie. And Nudie came prepared. She had photos of herself on the reservation as a child. There she is sitting on someone's car. And Nudie's an interesting addition as a participant because she really only lived on the reservation as a child. She moved away shortly. She's the youngest one in this group of participants. And what she really likes to do is walk Fort McHenry every day. So here she is. And you can see off in the distance the missing Key Bridge. I'm sure everyone saw that on the national news. And she's in this awesome period of self-renewal. So most participants, maybe we have like 50 photos. There's like 1,000 of Miss Nudie. Every day was a photo shoot. Her father, Mr. Iron McPhee Locklear, his first name is Iron. He is now 99 years old. At the time of this photo, he was 98. He is a World War II veteran, and here he is playing checkers in his backyard with his granddaughter, Valerie. Apparently, we call him Mr. Mac. He doesn't go by Iron, wouldn't you? He had nothing to do a lot of times on the destroyers where he was working as a Navy seaman. And so he played a lot of checkers, and to date, only one person has ever beat him, ever. So he kind of just put an exhibition game for us with Valerie, and she knew she wasn't going to win. Here's Miss Mary Helen Lewis on Slim's bench again, and the one other person who might have come outside didn't want to get photographed that day, but as Miss Mary Helen Lewis's son Stanton reminds us, there's only about 2 or 3 of those bench warmers left. So now is the time. And here is Jill. This is a behind-the-scenes shot that I took. Jill, kind of crouched down on the sidewalk talking to Miss Mary Helen as she takes her portraits. And then here is Miss Mary Helen, the star of the Broadway Diner on this day. Check her red fingernails out. So we totally disrupted everyone's breakfast. It was okay. Miss Mary Helen was determined we were going to take her pictures this day because she was slated to start dialysis soon after, and she just felt like she would be a different person afterward. Miss Linda Cox, or Sister Linda Cox, singing at South Broadway Baptist Church. This is the American Indian Church still extant on the former reservation. Another behind-the-shot scene of Jill taking Sister Linda's picture. She loves to sing. Her thing is singing Southern gospel music, and this is her spot in the pew that you could find her every Sunday if you ever want to visit Sister Linda and hear some Lumbee gospel in the heart of Baltimore City. This is another part of the church. This is actually in the back in the fellowship hall when Miss Minnie Sampson Maynor celebrated her 85th birthday, and that's her friend, Mr. Earl Strickland. And I wanted to say a word about the importance, something I didn't realize was going to happen, the importance of photographing people together or interviewing them together per their wishes. Here's Miss Minnie standing in the food court at East Point Mall one of the days when they were walking. And if you know Miss Minnie, she's a very flashy dresser. She combines bright colors and unusual textures and patterns. And Miss Minnie actually is battling dementia right now, and I think she looks beautiful in this picture, but to me that's not her, right? So, and I'll go through the list of all the health issues we navigated to get through this work, and this was the first one that I knew about, the only one I knew about when we started. I was worried about how to even schedule a meeting. Miss Minnie still lives by herself. She's very independent, despite everything, but she has a companion, Mr. Earl Strickland, who is kind of a quiet guy. He didn't want to be interviewed for the project, but he was okay with being photographed. You can see him clowning here. And when I got them together, there's just all these photos of him making a face, and Miss Minnie just explodes in laughter, and it was the greatest thing. And so then, during the same shoot at the Boulevard Diner, we have Mr. Howard Riedel Hunt and his wife, Miss Jeanette. And I said, Mr. Riedel, did you see this picture? Are you going to look at Miss Jeanette? And he said, no. But then he did. And then here's Miss Jeanette in her home, and Miss Jeanette in her life has been a big traveler ever since she retired from Lever Brothers, where she worked for many years driving a forklift. And she's so active, she had a hard time telling me what things she wanted to do. She said, oh, well, Ty already got bingo. We're not going to go to bingo. And so she wanted to go to the Hard Yacht Cafe and have lunch and get a drink. And here she is with her blueberry crush. And we had the best time and the best conversation. Mr. Riedel, here he is in his basement standing beside a photo of himself when he still worked for General Motors, as a lot of the Lumbee men in Baltimore did. His thing is to go to the liquor store every day and buy a lottery ticket. So here he is. and we had a great time there too, talking politics and everything else. And here's a behind the scenes shot of Jill and Mr. Riedel. And you know, maybe a month after we took these pictures, Mr. Riedel had a stroke. And he's okay, but you see, it's almost like we can't get it done fast enough. This project has occasioned many trips to the diner, which has been super fun because that's what all of the elders did in their youth. They hung out at another diner, another Greek diner in East Baltimore. Here's Mr. Maurice and Miss Liz at the diner, and here they are in their home holding their wedding photo. Mr. Junior Lee Locklear talked about, he was actually brought to Baltimore as a child and then had to go back as a teenager, and one of his relatives sent him to go hitch up a horse. So he had to go to where they said the horse was, and then he had to ask a girl to help him hitch up a horse, and that was embarrassing. She said, well, where are you from? He said, well, it's complicated. I'm from here, but I grew up I don't know how to do this. Can you help me? So this is Mr. Carl Locklear. We call him Mr. Charlie, showing Jill family photos in his living room in Aberdeen. Mr. Charlie is a character. Everyone who knows him. So there is a stereotype of the Lumbees in East Baltimore fighting and cutting people, and it's partially earned, mostly earned. And Mr. Charlie is here showing off his hawkbill blade. And Mr. Charlie might get into anything any day, but that day he wanted to go outside and show us where he has a big garden in his backyard and his dogs and all the things he still likes to get into outside. Mr. Carl Harding took us for a ride on a low-speed vehicle. This is not a golf cart. You can't drive a golf cart on the road in Anne Arundel County. That's illegal. Low-speed vehicles have to be tag titled and insured, I learned. and we had the time of our life. I was a little scared. I just knew he was going to flip me out one day. What he really wanted to do was take us down to the marina where he's the gatekeeper, and they have kind of a steep curb, and we went over it. And here we are down in the marina. And Mr. Carl actually passed away since he participated in the project, and he was one of the most enthusiastic people, the first one to be interviewed. He talked to me for 2 hours, and I can't believe I can't call him up and ask him questions anymore. So, you know, with the loss of Mr. Carl, though he lives on in many ways, navigating dementia, strokes, falls, the Key Bridge falling, it's really been a time getting through this, and I'm so thankful that we've been able to do it. I would like to let you know we are planning a public exhibition of the work to debut at East Point Mall in Dundalk, where they like to walk, near the food court, where Santa is usually set up. We'll be there right before Santa, per their request, opening on Indigenous Peoples Day, Monday, October 13th. And I sent the press release to the Dundalk Eagle, and they put us on the front page. So this is equivalent to being on the cover of the Rolling Stone locally. And here are the details of the exhibition. Feel free to take a photo. There's also postcards to invite folks in the back. More funders and supporters have joined on, and it wouldn't be possible without them. The East Point Mall folks are so excited. And if anyone would like to be in touch with me, here's my contact information, but I'm easy to find, and I thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Rebecca Friedman. I am here from Florida International University at the Public Humanities Lab. I'm here, as you know, with my colleague, the Assistant Director of the Public Humanities Lab at FIU, Dr. Aarti Mehta-Kroll. So we are very grateful to be here. We're grateful for the support and look forward to sharing with you. First, I have to, we're all going to do this, but a big shout out to all of our colleagues at the American Folklife Center who have been wonderful and helped us see this project through. And a special shout out to Jason Smith, who's here. Jason came down twice to Miami. And in fact, his photographs are featured throughout the project. So we're so grateful for his talents and for joining us. So thanks, Jason. I also want to give a quick thank you to our colleagues from Miami who are here with us today. Kimberly Green, the president of the Green Family Foundation, Lark Bennett, who works for, I always forget your exact title, I'm sorry, high up in our FIU Foundation. Thank you for being here with us. And also Carl Philippe Juste, who is from the Miami Herald, who is also co-director of Eyewitness with me, and he has lots of other titles. I also don't know if Marianne LaMonica is in the house, but thanks to Marianne LaMonica, who directs the Humanities Edge at FIU, who helped to curate one of our shows. So those are my thank yous. Now, prior to receiving this amazing community collections grant, the Public Humanities Lab had already been in the business of story gathering and story gathering initiatives in collaboration with many in the community and also colleagues at the university, most prominently including Dr. Valerie Patterson of the Department of African and African Diaspora Studies, and community partners such as Micaiah Brown. How do we do that? Oh, we get her picture here. Who's pictured here? I knew that was coming. Micaiah Brown, pictured here. Micaiah, as I'll tell you in a moment, is from the neighborhood that we documented, and she also is the director of Hope Through Arts, a local arts organization. So this was not our first collaborative rodeo, if you will. We had collectively decided to focus our application in particular on the Goombay Festival and the neighborhood in which it takes place, Coconut Grove. It's important to note that our university colleagues, both Dr. Valerie Patterson is from Coconut Grove, although she doesn't live there now, but she and her family lived there for a very long time, knows all of the characters very well in the project, and also our community collaborator, Micaiah Brown, also from and grew up in Coconut Grove, and in fact, her grandmother who recently passed, also was interviewed and photographed for this project, and an important kind of organic part of the community. So a shout out to all of them. All right, oh yeah. So there's Jason right there, if you can see him. The Public Humanities Lab prior experience with community data curation through a variety of projects I won't bore you with here, led us to take a very collaborative approach to this project as well. So we worked with a tremendous number of community partners, students, faculty, creatives in the community, on and on. So for the Goombay Festival itself, for documenting it, our colleague Enrique Rosell, the goofy guy in the hat up here next to Jason, who is a former member of our team, as well as Akitha Carey, who's the very tall woman in green with the hat all the way over there. She is a student, a PhD student in the Global Sociocultural Studies Department at FIU. So each of them recruited their own community of volunteers for our big days at documenting the festival. They acted as volunteers, they did the oral histories, and so forth, videos, and so forth. We also engaged students not just from FIU, but also from Miami-Dade College. So when we shifted focus to documenting the neighborhood as a whole, so we did kind of two big data intakes, if you will. One was the Goombay Festival itself. The second one was a call out to community photographers to come and document. We had some master photographers come and give a brief lesson to the community photographers. Then they went out into Coconut Grove and made images. And there, like I said, it really was pretty tremendous. We had over 40 volunteers, take out their phones and cameras and make images for us. Okay, so thanks to them too. Now, basically, what's important to us is that the majority of the photographs and the videos were, like I said, all kind of volunteers. So they're not professionals. They were taught by professionals, but they themselves are not professionals, making it a more kind of community organic project. Here comes Aarti. We're going back and forth. You don't have to clap. We're going back and forth.
Okay, so to tell you a little bit about the Goombay Festival, pictured there on the right is Mr. Herb Hiller. So Herb Hiller lived in Coconut Grove, and in 1977 he was working for Norwegian Cruise Lines. And they had a new cruise ship going out to the Bahamas, and they wanted to find a way to promote it. So Herb, he did not drive, he had a bicycle, so he was riding his bicycle around the neighborhood, and he was stopping and talking to, different shopkeepers. And he discovered that a lot of them were from the Bahamas. And he realized that there's this huge Bahamian community in Coconut Grove that people don't really talk about. So he said, hey, why not do a festival that celebrates it? And 1977 was still a time when the neighborhood was pretty segregated. There was East Coconut Grove and there was West Coconut Grove. And it was those two neighborhoods were very racially distinct. So he had this idea of let's do this festival that celebrates this heritage, but also bridges the divide between these two neighborhoods. And he pitched this idea to the editor of the Miami Herald at the time, who loved it, and so gave him all of this publicity leading up to the festival. He also approached the Bahamian Ministry of Tourism, who was thrilled, and sent the Royal Bahamas Police Force Band, who is pictured below. That photo is actually from 2005, but I found a fantastic video from 1978, where there's a police constable standing in the middle of the street directing traffic, just as a way of getting people excited that the festival is coming. And Herb stayed involved in the festival for many, many years, but part of what helped him get it off the ground and also sustain it was the involvement of several local community elders. And one of them, or at that time, just community leaders. So pictured on top is Mrs. Frederica Simmons Brown, who is the grandmother of our colleague Micaiah Brown, and she passed away this year. She was an original member of the Goombay Festival Planning Committee. Below her is George Major, the owner of Big Al's Barbecue, who was also involved in the first Goombay Festival. And, in the years that followed the first Goombay, the festival grew, I think at one point to include some 500,000 patrons, 300 vendors, a third of whom would come over from the Bahamas. And it kind of peaked at its popularity in the 80s and the 90s, but then by the 2000s, 2010s, it started to wane a little bit in its patronage. And there were certain, I think, organizational issues. And so by 2014, the festival shut down altogether. But then through the concerted efforts of a group of community members, city commissioners, and also with the help of Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, the festival was back in the neighborhood in 2022. And that's actually when we started becoming involved in Goombay as well, with the support of the Commons for Justice grant funded by the Mellon Foundation. We were in the neighborhood that year collecting stories, and right there is a little display that our colleague Valerie Patterson put together with the help of Miss Leona Cooper Baker, who was the unofficial Coconut Grove historian, or she would argue the official Coconut Grove historian. Unfortunately, she also passed away this year, but yeah, so the festival came back in 2022, and at first it was just held in a park, but very quickly everyone realized that there was too much energy, it was too big, they had to move it back to Grand Avenue. And so 2024, well, it moved back to Grand Avenue in 2023, and then 2024 is when we got this grant, and we started documenting it in detail. And so here are the members of the Goombay Festival Planning Committee, and I had the privilege of spending a lot of time with them. They kindly let me be a fly on a wall, like not the quiet kind that just observes, but more the one that buzzes around and asks a lot of questions during their meetings. And so, you know, spending time with them, I learned so much about what it takes to put together an event of this scale in a neighborhood that is rapidly changing. And one of the things that I asked them, and just going from left to right, that's Ms. Joyce Sands, Mr. Reynold Martin, Ms. Tanya Brown, Kelsey Hayes, and below him is Mr. Bo Leonard, Mr. Carl Springer, Vicky Rivers, and Ms. Juan Carol Kinchins-Williams, who is our formidable chair. So talking to them, like two of the questions that I asked was, well, what was their favorite part of the festival, and what they considered the heart of Goombay. And through those two questions, 4 different themes emerged that I'm gonna go through in the next couple of slides. So one thing that they all talked about was music. Music has always been an important part of the Goombay Festival, and part of why is because here pictured on the left is Mr. Billy Roll, who was a school teacher but also a jazz musician who had a band called the Billy Roll Jazz Band, and he and his band played at the first Goombay and every Goombay since, till the band existed. And so what the committee has done now is they try to get these major headliners that bring in the crowds, but they've also reserved an entire stage, and they call it the Local Love Stage because they want local musicians to have their chance in the spotlight. Something else people talked a lot about was the food, and how Goombay is the one time in the year where you can get all of the Bahamian delicacies you crave the entire year round, like conch salad and conch fritters. Jason got to experience some of this with us. Another big theme that came up in the interviews was the fact that Goombay is about people. Like, that is really the heart of the festival. So Coconut Grove, like many neighborhoods across Miami, has changed rapidly since the festival first began. It has been gentrifying. People have been pushed out. People have moved out. And so the neighborhood is really not what it used to be. And so Goombay almost becomes this time of reunion. Our colleague, Dr. Valerie Patterson, loves to tell us that Goombay is the one time of the year where she knows she'll get to see all of her cousins who she doesn't see the rest of the year because they all come back to the neighborhood. So, these photographs capture some of that energy in terms of people just being there to connect with their friends, their neighbors, their families. It's essentially a homecoming in the neighborhood. And of course, a beloved part of the festival is Junkanoo. Junkanoo is a Bahamian parading tradition that dates to the era of slavery. My colleague Sasha Wells at Florida International University has written a beautiful piece in Time magazine that goes over the history of Junkanoo and how it's basically evolved from this act of resistance to an important part of Bahamian cultural identity. And I'm going to show off some of these beautiful pictures that our volunteer photographers took that show these incredible costumes of the Junkanoo performers. And, in addition to having these beautiful costumes, they play with all kinds of different instruments: trumpets, trombones, sousaphones, whistles, cowbells. And once you hear the Junkanoo band come down the street, everybody just begins to move together. And to give you a sense of what that looks like, I've included a video here.
Yeah.
I'm back. Thank you. So like we said, there were really two major parts of our documentation. The first was what you just saw at the festival itself, and the second was our documentation of the neighborhood more broadly. Now, Coconut Grove is the oldest neighborhood in Miami, predating the establishment of the city of Miami itself. West of Coconut Grove also, I have to mention, are two neighborhoods in the city of Coral Gables entitled Golden Gate and the McFarland Homestead that also became home to many Black and Bahamian families. And they're really imagined for a long time as a singular neighborhood. And the residents themselves imagine themselves as part of a singular neighborhood. So when we captured images, it was from both the city of Miami part and also the Coral Gables part. Are we moving on? How do we do this? Got it. Okay, so the early settlers in Coconut Grove were white homesteaders and Black Bahamians who lived, worked, and played together as they established a singular community in what was essentially unoccupied wilderness. Mariah Brown, whose home is pictured on the left, came to Coconut Grove from the Bahamas in the late 1800s to work at a place called the Peacock Inn. She became the first Black Bahamian to own land in Coconut Grove. And another notable immigrant from the Bahamas was E.W.F. Stirrup, who, by the way, encouraged Bahamians to own their own homes and, in fact, served as a lender to many families who wished to buy and to purchase their own property. He worked in the pineapple fields and often received payment in the form of land. He used the substantial holdings that he amassed to build homes for Bahamian families that moved into Coconut Grove. It's, I think, a really important aspect to recognize the degree to which the Bahamian community valued owning land. Land ownership was kind of key to the Bahamian and African American residents in this neighborhood. And in some instances, generations of families through the generations continued to own that land, and they just passed down the property from one generation to the next, right? But of course, as you imagine, when an elder passes, then the question becomes for the family what to do with that land, and so, or that home. And in many cases, they get sold because the price of, the property prices are so high that it's beyond tempting to sell and necessary to sell and move out of the neighborhood. So there's been a lot of gentrification in Coconut Grove. Okay. But despite that, just to emphasize that the Goombay Festival itself really allows for this deep connection to place to continue. So yeah, this is a really interesting photograph. So older homes in Coconut Grove, Golden Gate, and the McFarland Homestead have several features of Bahamian vernacular architecture, which you can see here, such as wraparound porches and elevated floors to allow for airflow. Shotgun homes, like the ones pictured on the right, were also commonly found in the neighborhood. And of course, the shotgun, I guess it's actually a shotgun, right? The idea is if you shoot it from one end of the house, it goes all the way through to the back end of the house. That's how, I think which also helps with hurricanes and strong winds and so forth. It allows the flow. Okay, next slide. Thank you, appreciate it. All right, and then of course churches are a really important feature of this neighborhood. When Coconut Grove was first settled, it was unique in that it lacked the deep racial divides characteristic of much of the Jim Crow South. Most notably, Black and white people worshiped together at Union Chapel, now known as Plymouth Congregational Church. However, wanting to worship in their own style, the Black parishioners left Plymouth to form what is now known as the Macedonia Missionary Baptist Church, and they formed that in 1895. The two institutions, however, continue to have very close ties, although generally segregated in their parishioners. In 1901, Christ Episcopal Church was founded by a group of West Indian churchgoers. It's also played a role in the Goombay Festival, serving as the site of the Goombay Jump-Off and the host of the Pioneers Luncheon. So all of these kind of sites around the neighborhood ultimately feed into that festival that we have annually. Aarti, we're like orchestrating for you guys here.
So as Rebecca already mentioned, Coconut Grove has been undergoing gentrification. And again, Ashley's presentation touched on this as well. A lot of this links back to the distinct living conditions during Jim Crow, where you had African American neighborhoods that did not get the same investment as their white counterparts. And as a result of that, that's created rent gaps that makes it valuable to redevelop these areas. And so some of these photographs that our colleagues took really captured the encroaching gentrification. And I just want to take this opportunity to say this is why grants like the Community Collections Grant is so important, because it ensures that as these neighborhoods change, we're still able to preserve what's left so far. And a part of this is also what motivated us to create a website for our project. Well, the motivation was twofold. When I spent time with the Goombay Festival Planning Committee, I discovered that they had zero digital presence, which is a bit of a problem in 2022. So we created this website, and the idea was that it would serve three functions. It would highlight our project and all of our documentation efforts. It would also serve as a resource to the Goombay Festival Planning Committee so that they could use it to continue to grow the festival and sustain it. And then we also wanted to use this as a means to connect with our colleagues across institutions in South Florida who have their own collections of Coconut Grove, and to put this all in one place where folks can find it. And Rebecca.
Oh, that's me. Okay. I mean, I just want to really say I'm going to take a moment to say a huge thank you to my colleague, Aarti Mehta-Kroll, for having she's the one who created that website with the web developer, and also who did all of the hard work of collecting and culling all of the stories and so forth. It's a lot of work.
I need to give a quick shout out to our wonderful web development team, which is a company called Cubris, without whom that website would not be possible. So I'd like to
shout out. Okay, so one thing I want to emphasize is it's one thing to create an archive, right? It's one thing to create a website. It's another to be sure that people engage with that website and that archive. So one of the aspects of this grant and this project has been exhibitions, as we've alluded to. So we had so far, in addition to the website, we've had a series of public exhibitions, the first of which took place at Vizcaya Museum and Gardens in February 2025, followed by two smaller pop-up exhibitions, one in Coconut Grove itself at the Sanctuary of the Arts in Coral Gables, and also in Coconut Grove at Miami-Dade College Gibson Center. What we did was really what Aarti did. I hate saying we when I didn't do it. What Aarti really did was to print photographs on PVC boards, making them durable and easy to display. And they have been used for a variety of things. Everyone in the neighborhood knows that we have these images, and now they come to us to ask if they can take them to display them. And at the moment, we've just been asked by the commissioner for Coconut Grove, Damian Pardo, to have these be displayed in his new office on Grand Avenue in West Coconut Grove, on that side of town, which I think is tremendous. So we will be there for everyone to see, and this project's really been embraced. Okay, we're saying our thank yous. So we'd like to end by acknowledging the contributions of our many, 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 as you can see, volunteers, community partners who worked at us at all the various stages of this project. We could not have done this without all of them and each of them. And a huge thank you also to Michelle Stefano, that's how it was pronounced. I've been saying Stefano, and all of the Library of Congress staff, and again to Jason. All right, thank you very much.
How about another hand for these wonderful researchers? Yes. So I'm not going to read this whole thing because I think I just want to get right to it. I'm curious about community responses to your work so thus far. What's been the response for either way? This is for either project.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes. Just keep
Okay.
talking.
All right. So I was at the community meeting for the Baltimore American Indian Center last night to invite everybody to our exhibition, and folks were pretty excited. The participants and their children and grandchildren, I think, are the most excited. And also, you know, our folks back home in North Carolina. We have some members of our community in attendance today. folks who have ties to the American Indian in Baltimore are in attendance today, so that's exciting. I mean, it's a big deal. It's a really big deal. Yeah. We were able to move federal resources to our little urban community on the East Coast and then do a major exhibition at East Point Mall. So
Beautiful. Thank you.
Sure. So, yeah, I think I would say that I'm just, as you asked that question, I'm just remembering that when we had one of our pop-up exhibitions, one of the community members who we've worked with for a long time came up to us and let us know that, you know, there needed to be a more prominent picture of her church. And so,
Okay.
so I'm just remembering that. But I mean, other than that, I think that, you know, the feedback has generally been really positive and everyone has been very supportive about sharing their story and allowing us to be present in the neighborhood. You know, again, a lot of this was only possible because the Goombay Festival Planning Committee was so generous with me and allowed me to basically hang around, and they decided to keep me on afterwards. So it's been quite wonderful.
And I would just quickly add to that. I mean, it's been very, very positive. And also, I think part of the work itself, which everyone in this room knows, is the necessity to build trust with the community. I mean, you're within, we're not, right? We aren't part of this community that we're documenting. And so that does, of course, change the dynamic. And so a lot of the kind of work and effort and the beautiful part is getting to know people, as Aarti said, hanging around. And clearly, we've succeeded because Aarti's a member of the Goombay committee, right? So they have literally let her in to be a member of the committee. And I think all of that has been really, really positive and important. And it means we can continue to work, I think, with this community moving forward. Thank you.
Excellent. And so these were beautiful presentations, and we saw a lot of photographs, a lot of smiles, a lot of people, you know, really welcome you into the community, and all the positive aspects of the projects, right? So I'm wondering what the challenges were. Were there any challenges to gathering this information in any way?
Can I go first? I love challenges. I love talking about challenges. I mean, I think, you know, one of the challenges of any of this work, including this particular project, is that we go to, say, the elders, the Bahamian elders, and we say, hey, we have this new project and we'd like to interview you. And they're like, again, you know, because there's a degree to which the same people get tapped over and over and over again. So I think one of the challenges is that, and part of respecting their time and, you know, whoever your subject is and their story. And so the work that we did to gather the stories that were already out there really helped with that, because we're saying, hey, we're going to invest time to figure out what already exists, and then we can add on to that, right? Instead of just tapping the same people with the same questions again and again. And also, and then I'll stop, one thing we learned very early on in that first iteration of our participation in Goombay was when we did interviews of individuals from the community, we gave those interviews back to them. So we had some kind of a device that was one of those, I always forget what everything's called. An MP3 player, thank you. Sorry, an MP3 player, and we went around to each of them in their homes. We gave them the MP3 player, also a photo of them. So it was like a way of just giving back and saying, we thank you, we respect you. Please keep this story in your home, right? It's your story. Beautiful.
So to just build on what Rebecca said, like we approached this. Oh, sorry. Hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So we very consciously approached who we interviewed for this project because we were very aware of the folks whose stories had already been recorded. And so we were selective in terms of who we talked to because we didn't want to impose that additional burden of having them tell their story again and again. In terms of the challenges, it was so absolutely incredible working with all of the folks who came out and volunteer. When we put out the call for the neighborhood, it was literally through our different community organizations, through a local newspaper, and 50 people showed up on a Sunday afternoon to come out and take pictures, and 20 of them actually followed up and shared their images and sent captions and did all of this. So it was absolutely wonderful. But of course, I realized that I did not give them good enough instructions in terms of how to share these materials with me. So when it came to actually creating the metadata, that became challenging. And so that presented lessons for, you know, it was gratifying to work with all of these folks who wanted to contribute. but I think just for the future sanity of whoever's in charge of archiving, I think if we do something like this again, we have to be much clearer in terms of, and she knows, I did lose my mind a little bit. We need to be clearer in terms of explaining the role they also have to play as co-creators and data collectors.
I went down the partial list of medical maladies. There are also doctor's appointments, and I mentioned the Key Bridge fell as we were working on this, and I didn't say why that's such a big deal. So the Key Bridge spanned Dundalk and Glen Burnie, so essentially Baltimore County and Anne Arundel County, and we had participants on both sides, and it made commuting's still a little bit of a nightmare. Just stay in my house. That's a good solution. Reminding myself to stay curious about these folks who I've known my whole life and whom I've already interviewed. Some of them, like a lot of times, I bother my Aunt Jeanette constantly. She lives across the street. Also, just the nature of editing oral history interviews and transcribing. Somehow, no matter how many times I do it, I forget how long that really takes. And literally going fractions of a second at a time to give people the best possible recording of what they had to say. And I realized an answer I would have liked to have given to your previous question was these materials that we produce through the project are already precious. I mean, think about the images we have and the recordings of Mr. Carl Harding, what that means not only to his family, but to the Baltimore Lumbee community at large and to our entire tribal nation. So, they're precious already.
Beautiful. Absolutely. So both your projects, for me, elucidate, I think for all of us, a number of things, right? You do extensive archiving. You talked about how you eating, the mapping, the drawing, the websites, right? The photography, both engage in story gathering. And what I realized is, and I think we all do, is making place is about also processes, right? Your presentation really demonstrates this. Are these processes being passed on? Did any of the work that you did capture this? Especially when we understand that displacement might continue to happen, as some of you mentioned, gentrification, right? Just getting to a new place and making place, right, with the elders. Is this transference of knowledge at all part of your work or ways of being part of the work that you're documenting, so that future generations can continue to pass on, relationship building and the ways these particular communities do so?
It's a great question. I mean, it's like the question, right? It really is. I don't have a kind of figured out answer for that already, but I'll give some thoughts. Only to say it's something I think about in all the work that we do all the time. I mean, of course, having the collection in the American Folklife Center is pretty amazing, and that's in perpetuity, right? So that's number one in terms of the pass down, or especially in Miami where seas are rising, and, climate change hashtag, can't say that anymore. So all of that, to have everything in the digital space is tremendously important. Also, in terms of our project itself, there were instances where families would show up. So you have like Valerie Patterson would bring her daughter and granddaughter and so forth to the events that we did. So it's being passed down in that sense. Goombay itself, which is not our work, but the community's work, Goombay itself is, as I think Aarti mentioned, a place where the community from all over continues to gather. And so in terms of placemaking, Coconut Grove, the festival itself, and therefore I hope our documenting of that will help to kind of continue to uplift that community and to ensure, its longevity despite all of the kind of negative forces that we mentioned.
And just to add to that, just like Ashley, like your beautiful website that you've created, We've tried to do something similar with the website that we've put together in terms of bringing together these different resources for people who may be interested but may not know where to find everything. Because the amazing thing that I discovered about Coconut Grove when I was doing my own research about the neighborhood was that there has been so much story gathering that has happened over multiple years. So the University of Miami, the History Miami Museum, the Vizcaya Museum and Gardens, our university, everybody has these different collections of stories that are tucked away in different places, but they're not always easy to find. When I wanted to access some of them, it took me, repeatedly emailing this one librarian till she finally, invited me over and said, just come over and we'll look at this together. And I found these amazing records that, she later sent to me that I had access to. But it takes a certain persistence to do that. So with the website, that's also something we're trying to do. We've actually created an entire page that's just about the oral histories that are already out there so that folks can find them. And in terms of, and as far as passing this down intergenerationally, again, if you ever have a chance, for those of you who are not from Miami, to come to Miami, come experience Coconut Grove. It is an absolutely amazing community. And, I have no doubt that the story of that neighborhood will be passed down for many generations to come. And we're so fortunate that we have the support of folks like Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, who pushed to have the neighborhood renamed Little Bahamas in 2022. So that place is now inscribed with that meaning. So no matter how much it changes, no matter how many buildings are torn down, you'll have to stop and think why this place is called Little Bahamas. So there's definitely hope.
I ran into the same thing when I was doing the research for the Baltimore Reservation Project. There were collections at various institutions and repositories near and far that had documentation of our community that a lot of time the people in the community didn't even know they were there. So I'm in libraries everywhere snapping photos. Is this who I think it is? And people are posting to Facebook and, a lot of excitement. So I worked with librarians at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County to create a new publicly accessible collection. It's the Ashley Minner collection. But it's not just my research. Anybody in our community can contribute materials, and they have been and they will continue to do so. So this project, the documentation will live there as well as the Library of Congress, which is a huge deal. And the next generation of Lumbees interested in their history and heritage as it ties to East Baltimore are already at work using these things. I want to say also in 2017, well, let me back up. When I was in my 20s, the Baltimore American Indian Center still had the Native American Senior Citizens Building across the street on Lombard, and that is where the Lumbee seniors would go eat lunch. They'd cook our traditional foods, eat, and talk junk all day, every Thursday. And this is where I made myself an honorary senior citizen in my 20s. So, and that's why I was able to do the work for this project and the Baltimore Reservation Project, because we had that relationship. But in 2017, the Baltimore American Indian Center sold that building to stay afloat. It was necessary. And so the seniors lost their place to gather and eat together. And as a result of the projects, this one most recently and ongoing, they've been eating together again. They go to the diner together now. They don't cook and eat, but they go eat crab cakes. And it's really the best thing ever to see them in that space interacting again, because, you end up being kind of on your own. We entered a pandemic not too long ago. People were pretty stuck in their houses. And I'm glad that my own generation and those after us will be able to one day see the connections to what this particular group of elders have done and lived in their life, to understand why we're doing what we do. I mean, it's happening already. It's always happening. I can't explain to you who I am without talking about both Lumbee and Baltimore, and that comes from somewhere. It comes from them. So.
Seems to me we need to get you a mentee. Right? Besides all the folks that you impact with the beautiful website. And so, because again, you all mentioned relationship building is key, right? To preserving and maintaining these cultures. I am wondering what is next. with these projects? Where are we going?
So as Rebecca mentioned, I am now on the Goombay Festival Planning Committee. This is what happens when you can't stay silent during meetings. They look at you and they're like, okay, you're actually going to do the work now. So, you know, again, with something like the Goombay Festival, like I said, the neighborhood is changing. I didn't put up this, there was this beautiful project that was done a couple of years ago called Visualizing Grand Avenue in the 1960s, which actually shows the street in Coconut Grove where it had all of these buildings and homes, and most of that is gone now. They're vacant lots that are waiting to be redeveloped. And I think that redevelopment is slowly beginning. So once that happens, that kind of raises the question of whether this will still be accessible to what is essentially a street festival, because we closed down an entire street to have 3 days of celebration. So that's, you know, one challenge. And then the other is this has always been a community event. It's never been about making money. It's really about bringing the community together. But you know, there are costs associated with doing all of this. And when you have a group of these incredible community volunteers, it's a challenge when you have to suddenly turn into fundraisers and look for sponsors. So I don't know, I think funding is like the biggest challenge that we face. But we're all committed and we're all hopeful, and you know, we're gonna do our best. And again, this project has been, I just wanna say thank you again to you know, the AFC and to Michelle. This has just been a transformative experience for me personally, so yes.
Well, I'll see everybody at East Point Mall on Indigenous Peoples Day, Monday, October 13th at 6:30 p.m. in the food court. And if you just can't wait that long, we will be on our local NPR station, WYPR 88.1, on October 1st, which I think is next Wednesday, on the record at 9:30 a.m. with Ashley Sterner. And the exhibition will tour. After it's at the mall, we've had interest expressed from the Kent Cultural Alliance in Chestertown on Maryland's Eastern Shore, the Maryland Center for History and Culture, the Baltimore American Indian Center. The diner just has to have it, right? Like, both diners, they can fight over it. So the exhibition will continue to tour, and I will continue to do this work as ever.
Well, I think that is all the time we have. Let's give them one more big hand. Thank you so much.